Welcome back to the show. Now to discuss some of the big today stories of today, I should say, political stories. We bring on our power panel. Joining me now, MSNBC political analyst Michelle Bernard, David Drucker, staff writer for Roll Call, and Matt Lewis, a senior contributor for the Daily Caller. Our first question, is this the Republican candidate? Bachmann's got the momentum, and now she's claiming the top spot in the new Iowa poll. She has the support of 25% of Iowa voters, with Mitt Romney dropping to 21%. Tim Pawlenty and Herman Cain are way behind with 9% each. And among the most attentive voters, she's even stronger, with 32% on her side. Matt, is Bachmann a real threat to beat out Mitt Romney?
Absolutely. Mitt Romney's not going to win Iowa. Michelle Bachmann definitely could. She's from Iowa, but more importantly, she really fits into the sort of culture of Iowa. I mean, Mike Huckabee won last time. I could definitely see Michelle Bachmann winning there. I think, you know, the real question is, will Sarah Palin or Rick Perry get in? But otherwise, I think, you know, Michelle Bachmann can definitely win, and much more likely than Mitt Romney. All
right, but Michelle Bernard, the striking thing about that is that let's look at the primary calendar. If Bachmann wins Iowa, loses New Hampshire, and then is she doing well in South Carolina, wins South Carolina, it's the same kind of primary trajectory that President Obama had in the 2008 Democratic primary calendar.
Absolutely. I think it's really fascinating, and particularly, you know, for several reasons, but particularly if you think about back to 2008, the big question at that point in time was, will white voters vote for Barack Obama? And you will never, ever forget any of those very iconic images of all of those thousands of white Iowa caucus goers who voted for Barack Obama, cheered him on, and led him in the way to the White House. It is those very same people today who seem to be quite smitten with Michelle Bachmann. So the big question is, what happens in 2012? Who will those voters sort of, pin the head on the donkey on coming around the corner, and whether or not Michelle Bachmann is going to do what we saw happen with Obama and win Iowa, and then maybe go on to New Hampshire and lose New Hampshire. And just like you said, the big question is then what happens in South Carolina.
Well, David, you've watched her in South Carolina. What's the response there? How's she being received?
Well, the response was very enthusiastic. What I was impressed with Michelle Bachmann is that she conducted herself like a front runner who was trying to be inclusive of the conservative movement. And what I heard most from her in different stumps and different appearances with voters was that I am a social conservative, a fiscal conservative, and a national security conservative. She said, and this was her term, the three-legged stool of the Republican Party, that's me. And I think that for a lot of us who have followed Michelle Bachmann on Capitol Hill, the question had been, can she conduct herself as a front runner? Can she run as a top-tier candidate? And so far, I think the answer is yes, and that's what I saw in South Carolina. She definitely appeals because she knows how to talk about various issues. She's done a good job of translating her experience in the House, however limited it is, into something that sounds like she has a repertoire, and she is conversant on the issues, and that has made her appealing, along with her willingness to be combative and confront the president. And she laced a lot of her remarks with different stories about, how she'll do things differently and why the president's wrong. And that is what something conservatives really want to hear, is how things are going to be different, and beating Obama is a huge deal for them. And
all right, but you're saying she can conduct herself as a top-tier candidate. The problem, Matt, is how does she reconcile signing this pledge, this allegiance to the right, that is anti-gay, anti-choice, and until recently suggested that African-American babies were better off under slavery. Now the group behind the pledge dropped that language over the weekend, and Bachmann distanced herself from the line, but she raised eyebrows again with a press release that said, and this is, I'm quoting her, quote, believes that slavery is horrible and economic enslavement is also horrible. Economic enslavement also horrible? I mean, Michelle Bachmann is saying that economic slavery today is like slavery in the 19th century in this country. I mean, she's got this obsession with slavery. She talked about health care reform once. What we have to do today is make a covenant to slit our wrists and be blood brothers on this thing. This will not pass. This is slavery. This is her on the health care bill. On debt, it is slavery. It is slavery, that a bondage to debt and a bondage to decline. I mean, what is this with slavery? On homosexuality, if you're involved in the gay and lesbian lifestyle, it's bondage. It is a personal bondage, personal despair, or personal slavery. I mean, what's going on here, Matt? Is it her limited vocabulary, or she's got to hang up with slavery?
I don't know. You know, there's this thing called Godwin's Law, which, you know, has been in sort of, doesn't really mean this, but it's come to mean that you should never talk about Hitler, that it's always a mistake to sort of compare somebody to Hitler. And I think there should be some law that sort of says don't, you know, it's usually a mistake to bring up slavery, to inject that into a normal political discussion. Look, I think that not only that pledge was harmful, historically inaccurate. But I don't, you know, I think it's probably just a one-day story, to be honest with you. I don't think it's going to plague Michelle Bachmann. I think it's a bump in the road. I think it speaks to the fact that she has to be a little bit sharper. She's under the spotlight now as a front runner. But I don't think it's the kind of thing that's going to plague her that much going forward.
I got to say, if I could just interject here, Reverend Al, I think that this is going to plague her. Reverend Wright plagued Barack Obama all throughout the 2008 election, and we're going to see this with Michelle Bachmann. We talked about going to South Carolina a little while ago. This is going to be a huge problem. Every census study, every poll we have seen recently shows enormous numbers of African Americans leaving big cities and moving to the South.
Right.
Well in South Carolina, if she gets that far, the Republican Party is not going to survive as a party of white males. They have to find ways to reach out to African Americans and others, and the statements, the anti-gay statements that we've heard. The statements about
David, wait a minute. I want David, you're the one that brought up about her being a top-tier candidate. David, when you hear the statements that she's made about gays, about African Americans, I mean, how will, in a general election, if she gets there, or if she forces this party to have to reckon with her, how is she going to deal with the general voting public with these kind of statements? This is her talking now. This is not someone connected to her.
Look, I think you raised some good points. So there's two questions that are going to be answered in the coming months. First of all, can she handle the scrutiny of a top-tier campaign with all of the spotlight that she's getting because she actually is resonating in the polls? I want to know if she can put together the organization to actually win Iowa, South Carolina, Florida, and beyond. Second of all, as she moves forward and she begins to have success, if she does, the question is going to be, when does she start to transition from being simply a Republican primary candidate, and every candidate in a Republican or Democratic primary runs to the right or the left, that is standard. When does she start to translate and move to the center, and can she do it?
Yeah,
and
well, that's going to be the question.
That's something that she will answer over time. Either she can or she can't, but it's far too early to decide that anything's going to plague her. Look, I just point out that Reverend Wright plagued President Obama so horribly, he actually won. So these things that happen in a primary campaign, and even a little bit later on, don't always mean anything. It's how the candidate handles it.
I'm going to keep asking. Michelle, David, and Matt, thanks for a great panel. Coming up.